Whew, it has been a busy year. I've been trying to jump on to get some new content for you guys, but it's been tough. I've had a lot of projects going on, some personal things that have been, been dealing with. So finally here, get some content for you guys. Today, we are going to be talking about volumetric lighting and specifically how to dial in those settings to get the look that you guys are going for in your scenes, to kind of break up some of that fog and I'll show you all the tricks and all the little things to adjust to get what you need for your scene. So let's go ahead and jump on in. I have a scene set up here, pretty simple scene. It's just a little, some kit bash elements, some buildings with a couple lights to showcase a few different examples. But right now, this IPR render is only showing the emissive texture, which is the windows, the lights, and the little blips and doodads and whatnot. So I just want to show something, a basic setup, and then we'll dive a little deeper. So the thing about volumetric lighting in Redshift is it's not complicated. It's actually a pretty simple setup. There are just a few things you need to be aware of when setting them up, because you could kind of get stuck if you're not aware of these settings. So I'll just throw in, first thing you do, go up to Redshift, Objects, and you'll throw in a Redshift environment. And then I'm going to throw in an area light here. And we'll just rotate this so that we're facing the city. And then I'm just going to pull it back out of the scene and scale it up a little bit. Bring it up here. Okay. So if I set this to render right now, it is going to be completely blown out. Boom. And the reason for that is under your environment settings, under scattering, it's a bit of a balancing act between the amount of scattering from the Redshift environment and your actual lights. So what I do to make this easier when I'm just, jamming, trying to get something out and trying to just like look dev something, I usually set this to a pretty low setting. I just do 0.001. See, I'm starting way better. So that way, all I have to mess around with is the volume contribution under each of my lights. So then if I start to pull this volume contribution down, you'll see we get a much better result. And that's something more of what we're looking for. So you can control that per light. So you think about it, each light has its own volume contribution, and then this is for the entire scene. This is more on the global scale of what the volume itself is actually doing. So that's the basic setup. Now, if you add something to be aware of, if you add an HDRI to your scene, that also has a volume contribution to it as well. So you want to be sure that if your scene is still blown out and you have all your lights down and you're just trying to figure out what's going on, most likely you have an HDRI that's hidden somewhere or that is contributing volume and you don't realize it. So just something to be aware of there. So in my scene setup here, I just have one light shining from the bottom, and I have a HDRI, which has a very small intensity. I've stopped it down a couple stops, so it's just kind of giving a little bit of a cool shadow in the scene. And then the Redshift environment, the only thing I've done there is what I just did with you guys. I brought it down to 0.001. And if I fire this up, you see we get the light shining from underneath, and pretty cool, little setup here. Now, if I go into my light, under my details, you'll see I have the volume contribution at just above half. And it's not anything crazy. It's a pretty simple setup, but I'm going to show you guys what the rest of these settings do. So attenuation is the intensity of the light that the volumetric light is accepting. So if I pump this up, you'll see the scene starts to get a little bit darker because the volume is not responding to the light as much as it was. Now, where you kind of get into some crazy stuff is if you are playing with fog and you change the color here, you'll see that it affects what's going on up here. So you can kind of mix and play the two, but we'll just leave this at black for now. Go back to the default there. And you can also, with this, you can use the attenuation to adjust. I wouldn't use this to adjust intensity overall because this is a global setting. But if it's maybe a little hot or a little too much, you have everything else the way you want it, you can pump this up a little bit. Anisotropy is the basically where the fog. Think of it as like kind of pushing things further back in space and then pulling them further closer to the light. So if I mess with my anisotropy and I bring this down, think about this pushing, going negative. So you're pushing it back or away from the source. So you see that if you watch these buildings here, as I push this back, you see it's going further to the background, and it's pushing all that fog behind the buildings based on screen space. I believe that's what it's based on. And then if I bring it above zero, let's bring it closer to the camera, and the fog density is accumulating closer to camera. So the buildings are going to be pushed further back. I usually don't mess with these too much. I just kind of leave them be, unless the scene visually calls for it. You can usually get what you need out of this. So I have another light that I have is on the side here to help showcase that a little better. So if I move to the left, you see the fog is going to be kind of pushed over here to the left more. So that's completely gone. You have a couple settings here to play with to get a different visual style depending on what you're going for. So like I said, I don't mess with that too much, but I will play with it from time to time. So with that said, under our environment here, one thing that we're going to do, I mean, this looks pretty cool, but one thing that we want to do, and I do this with all of my scenes using volumetric light because it really helps give it a little bit more realism, more believability. It's not just a flat volume, is you're going to add a noise to the volume. So if you go up here to the Redshift tab and you go down to materials and utilities, you'll see you have here a noise volume, and that'll create a new shader. And if you go into the shader graph for that, you're going to see this default noise, which gives you the Redshift noise, default Redshift noise. So I'm going to delete that because I'm actually going to add in a Maxon noise. And you'll notice when I delete it, it actually gets rid of the volume output. So just be sure that you're not connecting it to the surface because that will be very frustrating, wondering why it's not working. So when you connect this, make sure it's connected to the volume output. And then for your settings, you have all of the Maxon noise settings available to you, and you can just go crazy. I already have one that I've set up that's I've kind of dialed it in a little bit, and that is this guy. And under here, I did the Naki. These names are so odd. I don't know, but however you say it, Naki. And what did I have here for the output? I did a low clip 0.1 and just brought the brightness and contrast up a little bit and then scaled it up. And you'll see that in here, I might have brought the octave down, or no, octaves is 5 default, I think. So if I fire up my IPR and we have our scene here and I throw this on the Redshift environment, you'll see that we start to get some interaction here. Now, if I adjust these settings, clip the low, bring that up actually, you get to see that we actually get some definition in the fog here, which is really cool. So you can play with the noise volume to add more realism, and you can also animate these things over time. You can animate the offset. Just make sure it's set to world position, not object, because that would be very frustrating. Animation speed, all these things. You have all these settings that you can play with and just get some really cool looks out of here that that you can use in your projects. Now, I want to just kind of show another scene real quick. I'm going to load that up and show you guys that. So I've got this scene here, and it's just a pretty simple kit bash element. And what I've done is I just wanted to showcase another example of how you can use the volumetric lighting, but more of in a uh, realistic scenario instead of a super heavy um, stylized visual element. Like if you're doing a super stylized like Blade Runner, you're going to use what we were just going over with that building scene. But this is more of how a lighter might approach lighting a scene with actual elements that are in the scene. So I've got lights and lanterns and in fireplaces up in the smokestacks. I've got lights inside of here in this little house, and that just adds little peppers in little elements of realism to help add some visual interest in the scene. So if I fire up my IPR, you'll see that we're getting some interaction with the lights within the scene, and you can control, again, per light, you control the intensity of its contribution to the volume. So if I grab this fireplace light here, let me go here, and I grab this guy, and I go to details. I can pump up that volume. And if we isolate this area here, you see that I start to get a lot more interaction here in the volume contribution. So, and then that's another balancing act between that and the Redshift environment that you're using. So, and you'll be able to see that a lot more here actually on these lights. So you get an idea of how you can just really play with, the different light settings. And honestly, there's so much that you can do with this, depending on what kind of story you're trying to tell and visual development and all that stuff. So that pretty much covers the basics of the volumetric lighting. And like I said, just make sure you add that noise in there because it's really going to help with the realism in your scene and just help break it up a little bit, make it feel less CG. It really helps on the comping side of things. So. All right, well, hope this was helpful, and we'll catch you guys on the next one. All right, guys, so that's going to be a wrap for this video. Thanks so much for watching. Appreciate you guys. Always appreciate the love, the comments, all the support that you guys are showing. Keep it coming. I have a goal to get 1,000 subscribers this year, so let's go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe, help me out making these videos as much as I can when I can in between projects and other things. So help me out, show me some love. Appreciate you guys watching, and as always, work hard, stay humble.